Becoming Catholic was one of the greatest decisions that I ever made, but it caused some real tension with close friends and family members. I want to share things that I learned through this lived experience of mine, maybe share some things that would be helpful for you if you're coming into the Catholic Church and your closest friends and family members are having a very hard time with it. Hey, my name is Matt Poole, and this is Unapologetically Catholic, the show where I talk about the reasons why I am unapologetically Catholic and think you should be too. I have absolutely, like I said in the beginning, have experienced this firsthand, and I, being in OCIA and helping with OCIA, have talked to a number of people who have said this exact same thing, that they're convinced that the Catholic Church is the church that Jesus established, and they really, really, really want to be a part of it. But it's extremely hard because they have family and friends and coworkers or whoever else that is really against it. So when growing up, I was Southern Baptist and became Presbyterian and then came into the Catholic Church. And the Southern Baptist church I grew up in, and I've shared this in my conversion story, but just to kind of help give you my experience, I think I'll give some highlights. The Southern Baptist church I grew up in was very anti-Catholic. They would say that Catholics are heretics and that someone who knows what the church teaches and believes but agrees to be Catholic, that person cannot be saved. So they would say that if I remain Catholic until the day I die, I have no hope of salvation. And this really started to come out when I told friends and family members that I was becoming Catholic. Now, there are people who have experienced this much more difficult than have had experiences that are much more difficult than mine. There was no one that was really angry per se or too nasty or mean, but it was definitely hard. I remember when I called my mom, I was very nervous to tell her that I was planning on becoming Catholic. She was not anti-Catholic. She grew up Catholic. She's Southern Baptist now, and her mom was Catholic and her dad was Catholic and all of her siblings growing up were Catholic. But she wasn't very excited about it because she has reasons as to why she's not Catholic anymore. And so when I came to her and I said, hey, I'm becoming Catholic, I was very nervous. Now, I do have to say, she took it very well. And I remember the phone call that I had with her, and she said, well, something to the effect of, if you feel that's where God is calling you, then you have to do what God is calling you to do. I may not be happy about it, but you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're the spiritual leader of your home. You have to do what you have to do. And then, then later on, we would have difficult conversations where just through talking, something might come up and she would say, well, Catholics believe that you should pray to Mary more than you should pray to Jesus himself. And just different things like that. Now, I did have some friends and people that I grew up with who were saying some really hard things. I remember one time someone had told my wife, hey, your husband has given up his role as spiritual leader. You need to divorce him, or at least take you and your children, and you need to take the role that he has given up. And that was very difficult. I had friends who I had for a very long time who would say things like, I don't understand how you can go into a heretical church. There were people who were saying, well, you don't need to hang around Matt. You don't need to spend time around him because he's going to try to deceive you. He himself has been deceived, and so he clearly is going to try to deceive you as well. And I understand why they said these things, because none of it came from this place of pure hatred for me. And I think this is a really important point to remember, is that 9 times out of 10, I would be willing to bet that the people who are saying these things to you because I know when they were saying it to me, it came from a place of genuine love and concern. So, especially the Southern Baptist church that I grew up in, like I said, they would say that it's heresy and that anyone who is Catholic and knows what the church teaches and believes cannot go to heaven. So, if that's the basis that someone is starting off with, and then you come to them and you tell them, I am becoming Catholic, they should be very upset, right? That it makes sense for someone to be very upset about that. Because if I care about someone and I know that they're doing something that I think is going to be extremely bad for them, I'm going to voice my concern, right? And so I think this is something that we need to remember when we're hearing these things from people and when people are saying these things to us. Now, if it's some like random stranger on the internet, you just have to ignore those people, right? Because they could be coming from a place of love and concern for you as just a fellow human being, or they could just be someone who wants to prove that they're right. And I think if we take a second to pause, because sometimes when people say those things to us, it can hurt, right? And it can be painful because nobody wants to hear your wife should leave you. That's hard. And no one wants to hear, I can't believe this decision that you've made. You know that this is wrong, but you're choosing to do it anyway. That's extremely hard to hear. But I think if we pause and don't get angry and don't just lash back out, but take a second to go, okay, I went from agreeing with everything that they said. We agreed on this major topic of religion, right? And now I am throwing a wrench into things. Now you, as the person who's coming into the church, you know that these things aren't true. You know that the Catholic Church is not heretical. You know that it's not some evil church that's going to send you straight to hell. You know that's not true. But they don't know that, right? And I think if we kind of put ourselves in their shoes for a minute, it can really, really help us to continue the conversation, which I think is exactly what we need to do. We need to have conversations with these people if they're willing to have them. So in my experience, like my parents, my specific more so my mom than my dad. My mom was absolutely willing to talk about these things. We would have conversations back and forth. We would disagree. Sometimes we would have hour and a half, 2 hour long phone calls where there were times where things got a little heated, right? And, it kind of, there was some friction there. But at the end of the conversation, we knew that we still loved each other and we were able to move on. It didn't cause a rupture in our relationship. And I think one of the things that really helped me with that is, like I said, understanding where my mom was coming from, and it helped those conversations to be a little bit more fruitful and to be better in the long run. Now, there were some friends of ours who said, I'm not talking about it. I don't want to discuss it with you. I don't want to hear it. I'll be praying for you and I'll be praying for your family. And I hope that you come back to Protestantism. There were some people that said that. And don't push it. If that's what people want, if that's where they want to be, you're not going to be able to force a conversation on them. And if you try to force the conversation, because sometimes you can be really excited, right? Like you're going through OCIA, you're learning all these things about the truth, and you, as the person who's going through OCIA and learning more about the church, you're really excited, and you probably see the beauty and the depth and the grace that flows through the church, and all you want to do is be able to share that with these people who are so against it, and 9 times out of 10 for reasons that either aren't true or are misunderstood. But I think with those kind of people, and even with people who are willing to have conversations, we have to remember that this is not just a merely relational kind of issue. This is not just a friendship kind of problem, but there's something deeper here, right? Coming into the Catholic Church, we have to think that, yes, the reality that we can see and experience is real, but also there's the spiritual side of things. And that's not always as real and tangible as the experiential side of things, I guess you could call it. And if we remember that, okay, we don't wrestle against fresh flesh and blood, but against principalities of the air, and this can help us kind of understand, okay, well, Satan does not want me to come into the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. He doesn't want that for anyone. And he's going to use anything and everything possible to throw a wrench into your plan to come into the church. So with everyone, I think that you should be praying for those people a lot, whether it's someone who's willing to have a conversation with you, or whether it's someone who's saying, that's it, I'm done, I'm not talking to you anymore, you're not coming to Thanksgiving, you're not coming to Christmas, I won't call you on a weekly basis like we normally do. Whatever the case may be, we have to remember to pray for those people and pray for ourselves and ask God to soften their hearts and to hopefully be willing to have open and honest conversations with you, and to ask you to be able to present the church well, to talk about the church well, and to have the conversations with the correct heart. Because I think that the time between you deciding that you want to become Catholic and the time you come into the church can be one of the hardest times that you'll go through as someone as a Catholic, right? I'm sure there can be much more difficult times, and I've been Catholic for coming on 4 years now, and I will say one of the that was one of the most difficult things. Not only because you're having arguments and fighting with, not necessarily fighting, but just having conversations, difficult conversations with people, and friendships that were there for years and years and years, or even a lifetime, can seem to crumble under your feet in a heartbeat. So I think another really helpful thing that you can do is to be involved in the church, at least to the extent that you can be. So try to find friendships with people who are in the church. Talk to people who've gone through OCIA. I think most parishes probably do like a coffee and donuts after Mass, or some kind of small get together or whatever after Mass. You could talk to people there. Try to introduce yourself and try to befriend some people within the Catholic Church that you click with and mesh with and can talk through some of these things with, especially if there's someone who has come into the church. And if you're going through OCIA, you can always talk to the people, the volunteers there, or the OCIA director or coordinator or whoever it is, and just say, hey, this is what I'm going through. Can you help me? Or what do I do? How do I work through this? And I think that developing good friendships within the community that you are coming into can be very helpful. But I will say that for me, when I was coming into the Catholic Church, I didn't know anyone who was Catholic other than my family. They lived on the other side of the state, and so I could talk to them on the phone and things, but it's not the same as being there every week, right? And seeing them in person and sitting down and having conversations, or sitting down over a cup of coffee and sharing stories with them, or having them over for dinner or whatever, and sitting down and human interaction. It's hard to have human interaction when somebody lives as far away as my family does. So it was very lonely for me coming into the church until I found a group of friends that I really connected with. And I think if you put forth the effort, most parishes are big enough that I think you'll probably be able to find at least one person, at least somebody that you can connect with and befriend. This can help a lot when you're going through this process, because it can be a very dark and lonely process. I think one of the really key things as well is when you're having conversations with friends and family who will have conversations with you, be willing and open and honest, and be willing to say, I don't know. Because they're gonna ask you hard questions. And you're still learning the faith. I'm still learning the faith. There's still things that I don't understand about Catholicism. And I think something that can help a lot to continue conversation with people who are willing to have conversations, or someone who is kind of starting. So I talked about a friend of mine who didn't want anything to do with this. Well, that friend eventually came around and said, hey, what? I saw this online. Do Catholics actually believe this? Or I saw the Pope said or did this. What is that all about? And don't you guys believe this about the Pope? And it can spark good conversations that can be really helpful and meaningful. But if you don't know, say you don't know, because you are on the journey into the church, right? And so I think if you're willing to say, I don't know, that helps people know, okay, well, they're willing to be a little vulnerable with me and willing to show that they don't know everything and they don't have the answers, but they're trying to get it figured out. I think that can be really helpful as well. So I would just encourage you, if you're someone who's experiencing this can be extremely hard. It can be extremely difficult to have friends and family members say, you are going down the wrong path. You are messing things up big time. I'm concerned for your soul. Or even just break relationships completely. That can be extremely hard. But I would highly encourage you to persevere in both prayer. Don't stop praying for those people, and don't stop asking God to help you throughout this process. He absolutely will. You never, ever, ever know what God can do with a situation that seems unredeemable. And continue seeking truth, continue seeking God, and continue the process, no matter how hard it gets, into coming into the full communion with Christ's church. Because the graces that are found within the Catholic Church are well worth it.